Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session from the Netherlands, from The Hague. We are hosting a slightly different session than the years before because we got a lot of people in the room, which hopefully makes sure that we have lots of discussions on the floor, but also maybe people back home behind the computer, you're welcome to interact with us. As you know by now, if you've looked at earlier versions of this SecRef, Security Revolution conference, then you know that our session is always about the human factor in cybercrime and cybersecurity, meaning everything besides the technical aspects of cybersecurity. So we got a couple of criminologists presenting today, lots of people from the legal perspective, which is also very new to this session. So I really hope to see some inspiring discussions with them about the legal aspects of cybersecurity. And we're going to do both some presentations about ongoing projects or projects that we just finished but haven't published about, because we think that's important to already share here. And we will have a roundtable with discussions amongst the participants of the roundtable. The first presentation that's going to be held here is Asier, my colleague, Asier Moneva, who will present about an ongoing study intervention that we developed with the Dutch police. And it's all about using Google Ads to deter potential offenders of DDoS attacks. So Asier will tell you much more about that. After that, we've got some room for questions to Asier and his project. We will do that from the room, but you're also welcome to do it from home. After that is Joeri. Joeri will present his systematic review that he just finished, and we're submitted it to a journal. If you're the reviewer, make sure to listen today, why this is a great piece. And it will give some information about the latest academic knowledge on pathways into cybercrime. So very interesting and much needed research, if you ask me. I will close that part of the session with a talk about scanning companies to make sure that we can inform them about how vulnerable they are to cybersecurity incidents, to make sure that they actually do something to improve their cybersecurity. I will tell you all about that later. Then we'll have a 5 to 10 minute break so we can change the room a bit, put the panel right behind me, and have some very interesting discussions with people from Leiden University, Delft University, NSCR, Netherlands Institute for the Study of Crime and Law Enforcement, THUAS, where we are here now, at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, but also the district attorney, and also somebody from the team High-Tech Crime in the Netherlands. So we got a nice mix of academics, legal, criminology, and people from practice. And we're going to talk about practice-oriented cybersecurity research. How can we do cool research that's relevant for them? That's what we are aiming at. And of course, how can we get your data? That's my main question for them. So this was me for now. I will give the floor to Asier, and he will give the first talk about our project into who searches for DDoS attacks and what exactly do they search for. Welcome, Asier.
Well, hello everyone. Thanks, Rutger, for the amazing introduction. My name is Asier. I'm a postdoc at the Netherlands Institute for the Study of Crime and Law Enforcement, and also here at the Center of Expertise Cybersecurity. And today I'm going to give a glimpse of our ongoing research in the projects in which we aim to deter and divert potential cybercriminals from carrying out DDoS attacks. This stands for distributed denial of service attacks. It's a type of cyber attack that aims to render systems unavailable by flooding them with internet traffic. And we've carried out this research together with the Cyber Offender Prevention Squad from the team High-Tech Crime from the Netherlands Police. And one of the most important questions when we are developing this type of campaigns, because these are ad-based campaigns, is to understand who the audience of this campaign is and what they actually looking for on the internet. So the whole idea is that if we deploy a series of online ad campaigns online, and if people see the messages that we communicate, they might change their behavior. During 2021 and 2022, we deployed a series of campaigns, 3 campaigns. The first 2 campaigns only in the Netherlands, but then after a while, other representatives of other countries also found this strategy interesting to prevent cybercrime, and they also joined in and cooperated with us to coordinately implement campaigns in several European countries. As you can see, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Portugal, and Sweden, in addition to the Netherlands. So just like us, cybercriminals also Google stuff. When we don't know anything, we just Google for it. And when aspiring cybercriminals want to learn new tricks or want to learn more about a type of cybercrime, they also Google it. The police knows this, and they thought, why not using the same engine they are using to search for cybercrime services and cybercrime resources to also advertise against them. And that's how the National Crime Agency in the UK came with the idea of using Google AdWords, a service by Google, to marketing whatever product you actually want, to actually disseminate a series of preventive message against cybercrime. Then the Dutch National Police adapted the same strategy and developed their own set of ads that you can see on the screen. These are different types of ads that convey different types of message, but the idea is still the same. What you're doing is wrong, and you should change your behavior into something that is more pro-social, like a job in cybersecurity. For example, here the first message reads, DDoS ruins it for everyone. And the second one is a more traditional deterring message that is used in communications by the police more often. Stands for a DDoS attack is illegal in the Netherlands under the criminal code. So the idea is by displaying this message, we might be able to change the behavior of aspiring cybercriminals so that they don't actually pursue a cybercriminal career, or in other words, cut the pathways into cybercrime. So an important aspect of this campaign is to actually understand who searches for them and what actually they search for, in order to be able to target our ads to the right population, to the at-risk population. So we first wanted to know who actually searches for these DDoS attacks. And for this, we harness the functionalities of the data collected by Google Ads to look at the social demographics of the users searching for DDoS-related terms. What we found is that in terms of age and gender, and irrespective of the campaign and in the country, most people who actually search for DDoS attacks were males. And in the Netherlands, we also observed that people from that were under 24 years old searched more often about DDoS-related keywords and also clicked more often in our ads than people above that age threshold. This aligns with what we know about cybercriminals. This aligns with the literature in the sense that we believe that cybercriminals are mostly comprised by young males. But this is interesting by itself and allows us to target the campaigns a little bit more. But what exactly do these people search for in the campaigns? And to answer this question, we were able to look at the specific searches that users introduced in Google that triggered our ads. Then we applied a series of techniques for text mining to understand a little bit more about what they were actually saying and reveal text patterns in the searches. So if we look at all individual words, terms that people entered in Google that were related to DDoS attacks, and then split them into a graph, then you would see something like this. This graph represents pairs of terms that come together in a search. So for example, DDoS and vol come together in a search very often, as indicated by a darker arrow in comparison to lighter arrows. How this graph can be interpreted is if you follow the arrows, you can start composing sentences that potential cybercriminals might also introduce in search engines when they are looking for cybercrime services. And this is for the first campaign in the Netherlands. And I'm going just to hide, this is a lot to process, so I just want to highlight a few things that I thought it was interesting as a preliminary analysis. So the first thing we see is that DDoS, short for distributed denial of service attacks, is in the center of the diagram and the center of the graph, and is related to almost all of the words. So DDoS was a pretty important word that appeared frequently a lot. What we see is that DDoS is related to unval much more frequently than to attack, which seems obvious now because we were looking at such patterns in among population in the Netherlands when we were planning for the campaigns. We were actually not sure if we should actually use terms in English or in Dutch, because we thought DDoS attack was a pretty international term. But apparently, unval is a term that is most used. This is important because when you are displaying your ads, you have to compete with other users that also advertise their products using the same keywords. So if you use unval, it is likely that the price you pay for your ad campaigns is much lower as if you simply include DDoS attack. And this in turn impacts the sustainability of the campaign, which means that you can run campaigns for a longer period of time with a lower budget. And I think that the police would be interested in adjusting the keywords to the ones that are cheaper, let's say. But what else can we see? So it is also interesting how if you follow the color dots now, you can create the sentence trans IP DDoS attack 22nd March 2021. And then when we look at the data, trans IP is actually a Dutch cloud provider. In the data, we observed a huge spike of searches coming out this day, the 22nd of March 2021. We later found that trans IP was the victim of a huge DDoS attack that rendered their services unavailable, not only the service, but also the website for a while that day. This is also interesting because this means that perhaps we can use the searches to trace back actual DDoS attacks. So perhaps searches can be a proxy measure for DDoS attacks. But what else? Then we also see a cluster of words that are related to DDoS attacks and gaming. This makes sense because the campaign was targeted at reducing DDoS attacks aiming at the gaming industry. So for example, here we can see a few patterns, for example, Xbox and PS4 booters, which are the websites that sell DDoS services. And Xbox and PS4 are the most popular consoles around. And then we also see a few games that were related to the words DDoS, like Minecraft, Apex Legends, or Ark. So if you're interested in targeting specific communities of gamers that might be interested in DDoS, you could start by targeting communities in these games. And what else? Probably this is the most concerning pattern of words that we can see here, because there's a lot of keywords related to booters services that also include words such as free, online, download, website, booting in Dutch and in English. So perhaps if you also want to target your campaigns to potential cyber criminals, these words show an malicious intent. So perhaps you should aim for those. So what we're just trying to pass the screen. So what? Well, this is important for two main things. First, because it allows us to understand a little bit more the pathways into cybercrime. We get to know better the jargon used in cybercrime communities. We get to know how cybercriminals' interests and techniques evolve, as we can run this analysis on a daily basis and also relate this data with Google Trends. And this also allows us to identify popular booters that are live at the moment of the searches. I didn't include those in the presentation because I didn't want to publicize them, but it might also be useful for the police. And for police work, this information can help the police make campaigns more accurate, targeting the really at-risk population rather than the general population that is just looking for DDoS attacks more generally, which also would make these campaigns less intrusive, which might address a few ethical concerns, and in the long term also more sustainable, because we would be able to find more specific terms that do not compete with others, for example, advertised by cybersecurity companies. And this was it. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. If not, you can reach me at moneva@nscr.nl, or also drop me a direct message at Twitter at Moneva. And now we are going to open the floor also for the people in the room, in case they have any questions for the next 3 minutes or so. Yeah. Any questions, lads?
Well, we got a remark, Asier, because you did not share your screen. So the audience behind the computer did not see your nice sheets with all of the word cloud. So maybe we can fix that and you can show that real quick, because I think that's very interesting to see. And then we can also check if it works for the next presenter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see the desktop now.
Yeah. So this was the graph keywords that I was actually showing.
Yep.
And these were the patterns that these were the demographics for users, gender, and age. So as you can see, males, the green bars are higher than the others. And also they are higher in the age interval of 18 to 24 years old. And when we were looking at what exactly did we search for, this was the graph that I showed. And these are the patterns that I revealed. So Dutch versus English keywords. Now the huge DDoS attack targeting trans IP. Now the terms related to gaming and gaming communities. And concerning cloud of words related to border services.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, you can.
Since you mentioned that, for example, you can aim the intervention at gamers, you also identified some games that are useful. I was just wondering if it is more effective to focus on specific subgroups with your warning messages, or more on people that serve DDoS in general.
Yeah, I think that really depends on what the aim of the campaigns are. So if the aim of the campaigns is primary prevention or general prevention, then you probably want to inform the broader public. That's a broader campaign, but you might be informing people that is completely not interested in carrying out DDoS attacks, and they are getting enough when they search for stuff. So that's inconvenient, that's intrusive. If you are aiming more at secondary prevention with people really at risk, then I would definitely recommend to target your ads to this particular population using these type of keywords that we know that have triggered their interest in the past. Any other question?
I have a question. Has also been researched what the effect is, if it is effective to indeed come up with these messages, and that people then will not click on these links and look for it, or make the second step and really carry out the DDoS?
That is actually a very interesting question. Glad you asked, because it's also part of our current research. We've used data collected by the Cambridge Cybercrime Center to measure the effect of the ads on actual DDoS attacks recorded in all these countries that participated in the campaigns. And well, currently the paper is being reviewed by other scientists for publication. So, but we've presented it elsewhere. But what we see is that the campaigns have mixed effects on users. So they do not clearly reduce DDoS attacks.
Okay. And the cause of that, well, that's of course, it could have to do with the text. It could have to do with, in any event, that it doesn't matter what. But yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to.
Yeah. Well, we have different. We elaborate on different arguments. The first one is that we believe that these type of campaigns has to be coupled also with focused deterrent strategies by the police, targeting more prolific offenders and that are responsible for lots of attacks. Also because the deterrent effect is larger when the police actually does this knock and talk visits and then knocks at the door, and then if you don't stop what you're currently doing, we might arrest you. But it might also have to be with noise in the data that we will attempt to filter in an upcoming study together with researchers from Cambridge, and try to see if that's the reason why don't we see an effect. Because in theory, and also what previous research shows, is that or suggests is that the campaigns might have been effective in the past. So perhaps there's something there that we are missing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there are no more questions, then I will I give the floor to our next presenter, Joeri Loggen, who will present a summary of very nice synthesis research on pathways into cyber defense and cyber enabled
Yes,
crime.
both.
Yeah, both. So we got the full package.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
I'll make sure that the screen is shared. There you go. Share screen. Yeah.
All right, it's working. So hello everyone, my name is Joeri Loggen, PhD candidate here at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, studying pathways into cybercrime, which is also the title of this presentation. So, yeah. So, what are pathways? So, a pathway is the steps someone takes to get involved in crime. From the moment he or she has never heard of, in this case, cybercrime, to the moment he or she is engaged in cybercriminal activities. And why do we want to have knowledge on pathways? Well, if we know the steps someone takes to get involved in crime, we can design and implement interventions into those steps, trying to prevent that person from engaging in cybercriminal activities. So this presentation is about mapping out pathways. We've mapped out two different pathways, one into hacking and one into financial, economic, cyber enabled crime, using two different systematic narrative reviews. And I will now talk about each pathway separately. So the first one is pathways into cyber dependent crime, which we defined as crimes using ICT aimed at other ICT systems, such as hacking, the development and distribution of malware, and DDoS attacks. So this is the screening process. A lot of numbers, you can forget about them immediately, because this one's the most important number. So during the screening process, we identified 15 papers that describe pathways into hacking. So we only found papers describing hacking, but nothing on malware or DDoS attacks. So this is a schematic representation of the pathway we found in the literature of hacking, which I will now describe in more detail. So we see two different initiation points into hacking. The first one is an interest in IT or technology or cybersecurity, while the second one is playing online video games. So when playing online, individuals can become a victim themselves of cybercrime, such as a DDoS attack on their IP address. They can start modding the games, which is changing aspects of the games, which leads them to modding forums and then cheating forums. Or they can encounter other individuals who have an interest in hacking. So through an interest in IT, cybersecurity, or through online gaming, individuals become interested in hacking. So next, they usually go online to places where they can learn more about the skills and knowledge necessary to hack. So they end up usually on hacking forums or on other places such as internet relay chats. And there they can learn from other people. So through a process of social learning, they learn the skills and knowledge necessary to hack. Next, they implement their skills and knowledge. So they start hacking. At first, it's relatively innocent. So they try to hack the accounts of their friends or maybe the website of their school. But gradually, these hacking activities escalate. So they start to target more high-profile targets, such as governmental websites. And instead of being motivated by curiosity or by wanting a challenge, they start to hack because of financial gain. So the reason they continue hacking or they desist from hacking is related to two different factors. So the first one is a cost-benefit analysis. So if they perceive the benefits of hacking as higher than the costs, they continue their hacking activities. And the second one is maturing. So when they get older, they usually stop hacking. So as for desistance, again, a cost-benefit analysis. When the costs exceed the benefits, they desist, or when they mature, so when they get older, they desist as well. So to summarize, we found two initiation points into hacking, an interest in IT or cybersecurity and playing online video games. That leads to an interest in hacking, which leads to a social learning process. Then the hacking activities escalate and individuals continue or desist based on a cost-benefit analysis and maturing. All right, so that was hacking. Now the second pathway is the pathway into financial, economic, cyber-enabled crime, which I will from now on call financial cybercrime. And we defined that one as traditional crimes using ICT to target people and obtain financial gain. So examples are phishing or advanced fraud. And the one that's now most popular in the Netherlands is bank help desk fraud. So again, we did a systematic narrative review, and during the screening process, we identified 7 papers describing pathways into financial crime in general. So we didn't find anything related to phishing or advanced fraud or romance fraud, only financial cybercrime in general. So this is a schematic representation of the pathway, which will again explain in more detail. So here we see again 2 different initiation points. So the first one is engaging in traditional crime, while for the second initiation point, we see that the people that start here are usually new criminals who directly start off their career engaged in cybercrime. So they have the feeling that they don't have enough money, which leads to strain, which is a negative feeling. And in order to do something about the strain, about the negative feeling, they will try to get more money. And the reason they engage specifically in financial cybercrime is because of 3 reasons. So first, they perceive that there is a lack of legal opportunities to earn money. Second, they have friends or family that are already engaged in financial cybercrime. And third, they perceive that the costs of engaging in financial cybercrime is quite low, while the benefits are high. So, traditional cybercrimes, traditional criminals switch to financial cybercrime, or we see a new group of criminals that directly start off in financial cybercrime. And when they decide they want to commit financial cybercrime, the next step is to learn the skills and knowledge necessary to commit those crimes, which is again through a social learning process, usually by friends or family members. So then they engage in financial cybercrime, and the decision to continue or desist is here influenced by 3 different factors. So again, a cost-benefit analysis. The second one is the use of neutralization techniques. So that is a way to justify criminal behavior. And the third one is again maturing. So when the costs exceed the benefits, when criminals can no longer justify their behavior, or when they mature, so when they get older, they usually desist. So to summarize, again, we see 2 initiation points into financial cybercrime, engaging in traditional forms of crime or experiencing strain. Then through a social learning process, individuals engage in financial cybercrime and they continue or desist based on a cost-benefit analysis, the use of neutralization techniques, and maturing. So that was the presentation. Both pathways are based on 2 systematic narrative reviews, which are currently submitted. So, any questions? Maybe here, maybe in the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you've now outlined both pathways for different types of different great categories of cybercrimes as criminalists understand them. Is it true that there is like a choke point for both of them at the cost-benefit analysis and the maturing process?
Yeah.
Do they both converge?
Yeah.
So if you had to start thinking about prevention strategies, which ones would you articulate?
So I would definitely focus on the cost-benefit analysis. So for both types of crime, let's talk about the cost, because the benefits is quite different. So for financial cybercrime, it's getting a lot of money, and for hacking, it's maybe getting a lot of money, but also like curiosity, having fun, winning a challenge, that kind of stuff. But the costs are mostly the same. So the perceived chance of getting caught is really low. That's due to anonymity, but also being far away from your victim. So you don't have to look the victim in the eye. That's also making the cost low. So I think if we would start to try to come up with an intervention, we should focus on increasing the perceived chances of getting caught, for example, which we could do by a Google Ads campaign. And I also think that it would be, especially for the police, a good idea to invest more in investigations into cybercrime and show that financial cybercrime or hacking doesn't have that many benefits as people think it has.
In 2 points you mentioned social learning, and so obviously that brings me to social learning theory. But in 1 point, I found it interesting. 1 point was about hacking, and this started something that starts basically when they go online. So communities and peers have an influence, right? And there is all the differential association or enforcement. On the other hand, for other types of crimes, you mentioned also the fact that the social learning might start earlier, so in families that are already criminals. Now, assuming that it's much more difficult to influence the social learning process in a family that is already criminal because you are already in an environment, right? What can instead, or what could we do to influence the social learning process in a positive way for people that are getting in touch in the online community? Because that is 1 step further. So is there something that we can do? Of course, ideas.
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. I did think about it. And I don't think it is possible, or it will be really difficult to target the hacking firms themselves, for example. But maybe we could start even a step earlier. So we found that online gaming is a gateway. So maybe we could start there with an intervention. That would be my best guess. But
educate beforehand. But and so this could be connected also with your Google Ads campaign, right, to a certain extent. But I mean, there could be a connection there, right? So educate beforehand. If you are looking for certain kind of things, inform them that this is a behavior that can lead you to a bad path. So 1 step earlier, even into schools, maybe, or something like this. Or not, this is what you meant as education and prevention.
Yeah, definitely into education, and maybe a bit of the systematic review. We've done quite a lot of interviews with people working with youth, and we know that even at the primary schools, they're already engaged in hacking activities. So starting there with education would be my best best, I think. Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
So there's a question from the audience. And yeah, so from P Denmark, probably Police Denmark or something like that. Did you locate a specific profile of the perpetrators, like background, family relations, mental health, or educational level, and so on? And would it be possible to get the full study? I work with preventing cybercrime in Denmark, and I find this study super interesting.
Well, first, thank you for the interest. So they're currently both submitted to a journal. So yeah, I think I'm looking at my supervisor.
We can share privately.
We can share privately. Yeah, that will be fine. So yeah, in the both systematic reviews, we not only looked at the pathways themselves, but also at risk factors. So we tried to make a profile. And yeah, for both hacking and financial cybercrime, we see a bit of different profiles. So let's start off with the problem. For financial cybercrime, we didn't find that many studies looking at risk factors and profiles, but what we did find is that most of them sort of were very similar when it comes to financial cybercrime, are very similar to traditional crimes. So male, young, having a low socioeconomic status, unemployed, lower education level, that kind of stuff. And for hacking, it was a bit more mixed. So also male, young, but education was quite mixed. There were also samples of hackers who were quite well educated, had a second or tertiary degree. And yeah, and the same for family situation was also mixed. So some came from a poor background, other from a good background. Socioeconomic status was also average or maybe a bit higher. So based on those systematic reviews, I would say that the profile for the more cyber-dependent crimes and the more financial cybercrime are a bit different, with financial cyber criminals looking quite similar to your traditional criminals, with the hackers and stuff, being a separate category. I hope that answers your question. And of course, in both systematic reviews, we've described everything in a lot more detail.
Got a question if there's time.
Quick question.
Okay, because you present a lot of results, but the key question is, of course, how good were the studies that were included in your review? Because if they were all bad, then we need to know. If they're all excellent, then it's, so I think that's a very important context to.
That is indeed really important. So I don't know the numbers out of my head, but I believe for the cyber-dependent systematic review, 24% had high quality, because we did a quality assessments of all studies. So of the 89 studies we found, 24% had a high quality, and I believe like the majority had medium quality, and also 25% had low quality. And for the financial cybercrime, on top of my head, 76% low or medium quality. So a little bit of the same results. So most of the studies were not great, I think is the summary. There were a few really good studies, but most of them did have quite a few shortcomings, from only correlations to not describing the analysis or the ethics, that kind of stuff.
So is it fair to say that the current policy is based on nothing when we talk about catching these criminals? Because there is no knowledge out there, so it's not a fault of the policymakers, but there's not a real evidence base to actually build upon, right?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair conclusion. And as I said, there are some really good studies. And again, in the systematic review, we've scored every study, so you can see which studies were good or which were not so great. But I think, yeah, overall, that's would be the main conclusion. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Joeri.
Yeah. No
Next
problem.
up is Rutger. Sharing the screen. Don't worry. Thanks.
What can we do? Everything works as here? Perfect, great. So, welcome. I will give this presentation on behalf of my colleagues Susanne van het Hoofd and Maaike van der Wal, who could not be here today, but I'm also part of the project as the last author. But I've given the honors to talk about our ongoing project, and I will present some of the first findings. And we're trying to finish it within the next few weeks. So if you find this stuff interesting, just contact us and we will give you a report before the summer. As you can see, the title is What Can We Do? What can we do? And we're using scans to actually look at the cybersecurity of companies without them knowing. This is the interesting part of this project and might also have some legal issues as I look at the lawyers in this room. And we're not only scanning, because everybody's scanning, we are actually designing an evidence-based behavioral cybersecurity intervention based on the scan. More about that later. So it's not just a simple scan. The scan is merely a tool to actually change the behavior of these entrepreneurs. And we're focusing specifically on small and medium enterprises, SMEs, because we know that the bigger companies, the vital infrastructure, but also large multinationals, they have their own people who are actually doing something about their cyber resilience of the company. So they should be covered. They should be able to invest money. They should be able to hire people, while the smaller companies, which is, by the way, like 80% of our economy in the Netherlands, they don't have that. So we're trying to develop the scan to make sure that those companies also know what they actually can do. And why is it important? Because SMEs, small and medium enterprises, we always think about little streets like this in the Netherlands with little shops, and they are, right? They are part of small and medium enterprises, but also more areas like this. You can see large companies. Maybe they generate a lot of traffic, they generate a lot of money, they sell big stuff. But also, this is an example of the harbor in the Netherlands, the Rotterdam harbor. There are over 500 small and medium enterprises in this area of the harbor, and they're all interconnected in an ecosystem. And you can imagine if a couple of those organizations stop functioning because of a cyber attack, it might actually affect the harbor. So therefore, it's not only these kind of local shops, it's also industry, and it's also even the vital infrastructure that we're trying to help with this project. And why is that important? I think everybody knows by now, but I think it's important to keep sharing this message that companies fall victim to cyber attacks a lot. So it's not only a couple of big companies that actually, becomes a victim of a cyber attack. We did a survey a couple of years ago, and Statistics Netherlands repeated that last year. And we know that every year in the Netherlands, 1 in 5 companies falls victim to a successful cyber attack with financial loss. So not just a spam email and saying, oh, it was really annoying. No, actually a successful attack that made sure that they either lost time, that they lost resources, or they lost their systems, etc., etc. Meaning we have a huge problem when it comes to securing our organizations. Because 1 in 5 basically means that in 5 years, all of our organizations have to go through this. Meaning you better be sure that you're cyber resilient, that you know what to do when you're under attack, so you can make sure that the losses are as little as possible. This is Dutch, so I will teach you some Dutch. It says from theory to practice. This is the book that we've written last year. And we kind of look back at our research program over the past 4 years and everything we learned. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned is that we really want to reach those entrepreneurs, those small and medium enterprises. We really want to help them. There are lots of tools out there to help them, but they don't seem to be interested in it. Not because they don't care about the organization, but because they're too busy with their business and all of the things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Meaning that IT security is usually not on the top of their head, on the top of their head at all. Only if an incident happened, but then it's too late, of course. So we really started to think about ways to make sure that we can get these entrepreneurs interested in cybersecurity, because it can really benefit the resilience of their company. And one of the things that we've seen over the past years is that we worked a lot with municipalities and organizations that represent other businesses, and they all know that they want to protect the businesses either in the region or in the branch. So what we did is a lot of scanning, a lot of free scans for companies, and then we would organize in a little room like this, we would organize a gathering with sandwiches or beers or whatever to get those entrepreneurs here and to share the results of the research or the results of the scans, and to make sure that they became informed about their cybersecurity and what they could do. And I was always disappointed when we had one of these meetings, because the room literally looked like this. Either nobody would show up or 10 or 20 entrepreneurs, while there were maybe a couple of hundred in that area. And the ones that did show up were the ones that actually were already invested into doing something with cybersecurity. So they were already interested in the topic. So what we did is we said, okay, these scans are interesting because you can do a lot of them, but there's little empirical evidence about their effects. So what we're going to do is we're going to design an evidence-based cybersecurity intervention. So what did we do? What did we do exactly? We did not ask companies to join, because then we know that either nobody does it or only the companies that are already doing something in cybersecurity. What we did is we used publicly accessible data that hackers also use with all sorts of vulnerabilities to make sure that all of the details that are in those databases that we can use to scan the systems of the entrepreneurs that are connected to the internet, based on their domain names, for example. Based on that, based on the scan, we would have an automated report made for them, and we send them. And then we use different strategies of risk communication to make sure that we find out the best way to communicate with them, to make sure that they actually do something. And we used, based on the literature, we used anticipated regret. If you want to know what it is, just Google it. It's a psychological mechanism to make sure that people think, oh yeah, I should really invest in this. We use social norm, meaning that if your neighbor does something, you're more inclined to do it yourself, or we use no risk communication. And this is a map of the Hague area, and you can see all of the little red dots. Those are areas where a lot of companies are located. And I'm not going to share which of those regions we picked, but we randomly picked 4 of those regions. And what we did by hand is look up every company in that area, made a huge list of a couple of thousand of those companies, and make sure that we looked up their domain names. And then we started scanning. So what do we have? We have 4 areas that we scanned. First one, we did no risk communication at all when we provided them with the results. The second one, we used anticipated regret. The third one, social norm. And the fourth one is the control group. So we did not do anything. And the nice thing about these scans is that we can do it without them knowing it. So we scan to see whether your data has been breached, whether there's information about your employees somewhere on the dark web. We can see if you're blacklisted. We can see if there are ports that are open or not secured. So we look at 10 different things to make sure that we get some sort of idea about the state of your cybersecurity. And of course, it doesn't mean that your company is not secure if all of these things are not good, but it really gives a good indication of the state of cybersecurity. So we did this for all of the 2,000 companies in those 4 areas, and we use different ways to inform them. And what we're going to do now, after we informed them, we literally sent them a letter with the results. We're now scanning again, and we're doing that again in a couple of months to see which one of those strategies we used were most effective in making sure that all of the vulnerabilities that we identified in the report were actually taken care of. Just to give you an overview, this is the first measurement, so it doesn't mean anything yet. We're going to wait for the second or third one. But we looked at all sorts of different aspects, and this is the scores, the mean score of all the areas. And you can see there is no significant difference. And we hope to see differences in a second and third wave of data collection, because then we can see which way of informing those entrepreneurs actually works. So this is the exciting part of the study. These are some more stats. I don't have any time to actually present all of it, but you can kind of get an idea of what we measured, and you can also see that there are not really differences. You can see that, you know, just by looking at it, there won't be any significant difference between those areas when you look at this. So really interested to see what happens after we provided them with the information about why is the company at risk, what is not good, and we're also making sure that they know what to do. So we're not only providing the scan saying, hey, this is not good or that is not good. No, if this is not good, we also say, go here to fix it. And if you have an IT supplier, make sure that the supplier knows to do this. If you don't have it, you need to do this yourself. So we really try to make the scan into a behavioral change intervention. And we're really interested to see if this works, because if it works, it's really scalable, because we now scanned a couple of thousand companies, but in a few days you can scan a couple of million companies and send them all this information and make sure that they actually get a signal to do something with their cybersecurity. If you want to have more information about this, please ask your questions to Susanne, Maaike, or myself. The contact details are in here. And I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. So please let me know if you have any, and after that we'll take a short break and we go to the panel.
Thank you. What do you expect about this kind of campaign? Do you think companies will actually do something about it? How effective the communication do you think it is?
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but what I've seen so far is that if you ask companies to participate in your scan, we gave away 1,000 free scans a couple of years ago. Nobody wanted it because it's a lot of work. So the couple of companies that did do it, they were already, you know, working on cybersecurity and stuff like that. And we want to reach the 99% that don't invest in cybersecurity. So this is a very interesting way to use open source data of those companies to map their cybersecurity. Of course, it's not a complete picture, but it does tell you something about the state of cybersecurity. To give them the information, to experiment with different ways of presenting that information, and then measure the effect. So if this doesn't work, then I'm going to stop with these things. That's basic. So I honestly hope that one of them is significant. And of course, I hope to see a drop in the vulnerabilities that we see based on the reports that we sent them. But honestly, I don't know. It's just a very interesting scientific experiment, but also if it works, then it can really be beneficial for municipalities, for branch organizations. And there's a lot of interest from those organizations to use scans like this. They were all worried about the legal consequences. So we also did a legal check. I did not mention that in the talk, but our legal people did not find any limitations of why you would not be able to do this, because everything is open source. But maybe some of the people here have different ideas about it.
I don't think any legal issues, maybe ethical, but I really wonder how the companies are going to react themselves. What I was thinking while you were speaking is, how could this be playing out if you can do this scan? How can this be playing out in terms of industrial espionage, in terms of insider threats?
Yeah. Yeah. So the interesting thing is, of course, that hackers already used all the material we're using, because they know about the vulnerability databases, stuff like that. So what we also report to the companies is that, hey, we use open source data. There were no ethical hackers involved that actually infiltrated your systems. This is all based on the available data out there. But this is a clear sign that you are either at risk or no at risk. We give, of course, different levels of how high the risk is. So this is also something that I think from an ethical point of view, I think it's even good to inform them, because it's out there and it's being used. So it would also be strange to not inform them about, hey, this is going on. It's, I'm trying to think of a comparison with the real world, but I can't think of it real quick. But
just one thing, you use open source data, but did you use personal data? Because just because it's open source doesn't mean that it's not protected.
Yeah, no, we of course stayed away from personal data, and we did not save anything also at all. But what you can easily do is, for example, look at the domain name and look for email addresses that are out there, that are, in which the domain name is included, without looking at the first name or the second name, etc. So it's more about seeing if those sorts of information is it out there or not, and if it's, then it's good for them to know and to fix it. Same with scanning ports that should not be open. We haven't done anything with it, but it's good for them to know that it's not good, and that either they have to do it themselves or the IT supplier should do it. So I also kind of had the feeling, well, we might set up a hotline, because everybody's going to call us and say, hey, what did you do? Not yet. So and the letters are all out there. So of course, a couple of companies reached out to us, but that was more like, why are you doing this? Or not, they were not like, they didn't have any interesting ethical concerns.
Yeah, I was curious, how did you communicate to them? Because to know that it's a trustworthy source that it's coming from.
Yeah.
Because for me, that would be a thing.
So we thought about it and we discussed it a lot, and we used the Hague University of Applied Sciences and a platform Veilig Ondernemen. It's in Dutch, sorry, I don't know the English term, but that should make sure that they know it's from our university and that it's from their local entrepreneurs kind of organization. And some of the municipalities did not want to be on there just because of this reason. We don't want to have kind of strange things that entrepreneurs think that we are scanning them. So there's a lot of debate behind closed scenes about, okay, we want to do it, but we don't want to be the ones to do it. And so we try to tackle it by sending it out from us. But of course, in the future, when we're going to give away the intervention, we can't do that. So this is also an interesting question of who should take care of these scans and who's a trustable party in the eyes of the entrepreneurs. Yeah.
It was literally done on paper.
That was,
Yes, very good colleagues.
Yeah.
Thousands of letters and things sent.
I personally want to thank Marco also for helping with the letters.
No, but that was actually the thing, to give a sort of
so
liability.
we also thought about we don't want to send them an email.
Yeah, because I was thinking of that.
So we decided to send them an actual letter with a report. Of course, we know their address because we know the domain and we know where they're located. I'm very curious to see if this works. And the nice thing about the scans is that in a couple of hours you can scan all of them again. So we're going to have 3 measurements. So it will be really interesting to see if it has a short-term and a long-term effect. You can even continue measuring it. So it's a very promising way to actually see if you can get them to move and do something. But that's the key here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you
Very
very
good.
much.
So thanks all panelists. We're going to take a 10-minute break and you will be watching a video meanwhile. We take this break. Be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. So, hi everyone. We're back again in our live session from the Netherlands, from the Hague University of Applied Sciences. And in this second part of the session, we have this fantastic panel of experts from police, from the Openbaar Ministerie, so from the Public Prosecution Service, and also from academia. From your right to your left, Wouter Klijnsoon, Cyber Offender Prevention Squad Team Anti-Crime of the Netherlands Police, Else de Busser from Universiteit Leiden, Koen Hermans from the OM, Rolf van Wegberg from Delft, and Rutger Leukfeldt from the NSCR and also THUAS. And right now I'm going to ask themselves to introduce themselves, to tell you what their main interests are and what their actual job is. So do you want to get started, Rutger? Brief introduction. 1 minute.
Yeah, I can't say no anymore. So I also gave the introduction, of course, of the workshop, but for those who just joined, my name is Rutger Leukfeldt. I'm the director of the Center of Expertise Cybersecurity here at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and there are 4 research groups within that, from very technical to risk management of cybersecurity to governance to human factor research, and I lead that last group myself, which is the cybercrime cybersecurity group, which holds a number of criminologists and psychologists doing research into human factors of cybercrime. And I'm also senior researcher at the Netherlands Institute of the Study of Crime and Law Enforcement, where we do fundamental scientific research. And I try to combine both the fundamental research and applied research. And when the police and public prosecutors cooperate with us, it can be really fun. And we get very interesting data. So this is actually what I love to do, and we can actually produce stuff that's also relevant for the field, I hope. So I think that's it for me, Asier.
Rolf? Yeah, sure. Rolf Wegberg, assistant professor at Delft University of Technology. I have a background in criminology and computer science, and I am working in a research group in Delft that hosts about 20-25 people, multidisciplinary group doing cybersecurity, empirical cybersecurity research, and within that, I'm leading a cluster that does cybercrime research. Computer scientists and social scientists working together on empirical measurements of cybercrime from seized data sets where we work with law enforcement or from large-scale computer science techniques that create measurements like Telegram groups, et cetera, and we're trying to find evidence-based intervention strategies. Koen?
Thank you. Koen Hermans, National Prosecutor Cybercrime, and that's actually 50% of my job. The other 50% I investigate together with the police cybercrime and prosecute these criminals. And then the question was my actual job, but no, that is actually my actual job. So that was it.
Else de Busser, I'm assistant professor of cybersecurity governance at Leiden University at the Faculty of Governance and Global Affairs. I'm a lawyer and criminologist by training, but then specialized in international cooperation, criminal matters, and data protection. And I now focus mostly on the embedding of fundamental rights and rule of law in technology, or the opposite effect of digitalization on the rule of law and human rights. So I teach courses like digital justice and data protection and the legal perspectives of cybersecurity.
Right. Wouter Klijnsoon, I'm an intervention specialist at the Dutch National Police of the team High-Tech Crime. I have a background in criminology as well, so I'm not very original there in this group. But we started 3 years ago with this team, focused on offenders committing cybercrime, because we can't arrest our way out of cybercrime. We have to come up with other initiatives. So we do 2 types of things. We either build interventions for various types of offenders, which is why we are trying to work with academia as much as possible to evaluate them, to see where we need to go next, etc. So that's one thing, interventions, try to prevent them from committing crime or entering that pathway that we often talk about. And secondly, we try to work together with operational teams, with prosecution office, to add prevention to ongoing investigations. So imagine there is 1 or 2 admin arrested from a platform. How can we make sure that these arrests are amplified and that we can also get others to go somewhere else or deter them, inform them, etc. So think about customers or other risk groups. So those two things we're doing with our team, and yeah, we try to work together with you guys to see if we're doing the right things. And I think that's what we're talking about today.
Definitely. So I'm glad that you already brought up collaboration between practice and academia, because that's one of the things some of you already mentioned that you were very interested in, or either developing interventions or working directly. Also between practitioners, you also collaborate together. So that's really nice. But I'm wondering if you had to pick like the biggest challenge in bridging this gap between the ivory tower of academia and the fieldwork of practice, what would this great challenge look like? Rutger.
Well, no, I don't want to start. Maybe Wouter can start.
I wrote down 3 things. Is it okay? The
It's
biggest one, the one we are struggling with since we started, is the sharing of covered information, especially covered information. So often, as we are, especially if we're working with ongoing investigations, some platform has was seized, or there's an image, or some country is about to arrest somebody. We have these questions, and I know that you're working on these questions, and I simply can't connect you because we're not allowed to, and I have to wait. And we have all these databases of images that are seized by other law enforcement agencies, and I know they're there, and it's this gold mine, and we can't do anything, and that's a struggle. So yeah, the sharing of information, especially covered information, giving you in a simple way access to our police systems. We still didn't manage it. We tried for 3 years now. Still did not succeed, and we're actually trying. So that's one. And the second one is to translate your results, your findings to our actions. We are sometimes living on day-to-day business. Like if there's a criminal team more urgent, or there's an opportunity in an investigation, how can we then use, for example, the Google Ads results? You find that this works and this doesn't in this specific experimental setting, and then yeah, sometimes as a practical organization, we're struggling to implement these findings in a good way, I think, instead of being opportunistic to actually embed them. I will stick to those 2 for now.
All right. Huge challenges.
Yep.
So I think you hint at also communication from academia, right? The way we communicate our research is perhaps not.
I'm definitely sure it's from both ways. I mean,
Are you just being polite?
no. Well, for the first one, the sharing of information, covered information, often we're not allowed because of laws of other governments or of our own BPG. So we have to be creative in that. For example, see if we can find somebody who can work with us in the organization, stuff like that. So, and how you present it, yeah, both ways. I don't have a solution yet, otherwise I wouldn't tell them. No.
Can I just pick up on that? Because it's also exactly what I wrote down, the translation between research and practice, where, you know, the ivory tower is a good metaphor, but it shouldn't be there anymore. And I think for those of you online who were here for the first part, I think Asier gave a really good example of what it could look like when research is one thing, conclusion of a research is one thing, but then you need to have that extra layer, that extra translation of now translating, almost literally translating conclusions of a research, findings of a research into something actionable, into something that law enforcement or prosecution or whoever you are addressing with your research can actually use. And that should already be clear at the setup of a research. And it's a layer that is often forgotten. And whether or not, I think it would be making a lot of sense to do that together with who you are addressing with your research, in this case, the topic of today, law enforcement and prosecution. But it's also something that universities need to be aware of and need to get better at. How do you translate these dry, theoretical, academic findings into some action points? It's a skill. And mastering that skill is something that we also need to get better at as academics.
Can I ask a question on that? How do you see the different goals that we have as law enforcement versus academia goals?
I think maybe Koen can also say something about, because we were talking about that before. I think we do have some common interests, There's a Venn diagram here. I think we're both trying to understand the world a little bit better, but we have different methods for that. But I'll give you the
Exactly.
floor.
No, you're completely right. I think we have an overlap in what we aim for, and that's indeed understanding the world a little bit better. Let's say it like that. Our aim is truth finding, and of course, trying to make the world a little bit safer. That's actually what our aim is, and that truth finding is also something in a way you also want to understand what's actually going on. So there is an overlap, and there's important to actually be in touch with each other. And before this session, actually, I had been thinking, what is the biggest challenge? But actually, the biggest challenge, if you ask me, is time. And it's time to sit together and to talk it through, because there's more possible than we a lot of the time think there is, but we don't have time, or we don't create the opportunities to sit together and and come to the next step.
Yeah, can I pick up on that? Because I also wrote down something similar. I don't think it's time, because we have been talking in the last few months. We have been talking, well, we talk a lot. I think what the real problem is that it's too fragmented. So we do talk, and I know what you find interesting. I know what my interests are. I know how they align. But none of us actually have time to invest in the long term to set up a research program. Well, there are some examples in which you can do it right, but I think Rolf maybe can give some examples. And we ourselves also try to do it because we do applied research. So what we try to do is to figure out, hey, what do you guys want on the short and on the long term? How can we make sure that it lines up with our own research interest to make sure that we come together somewhere? But I still see the problem that if you don't have people that are funded to bridge those worlds constantly, you're still losing each other, because I now have the money to do something, but you might not be interested because you're doing something for Europol, which is very important, or you're going on a training, and the other way around is you're starting an intervention now, and I say, yeah, but I don't have any people. So I think even though we still manage to talk to each other, I think we don't have anything that's durable, and we don't have any people that are actually in both worlds. And if we can figure out a way to arrange that, other than some sort of course, I've got Joeri, for example, who works also at the Hague, which is kind of a police organization for a while and stuff like that. But that's more ad hoc. That's not something that everybody does. That's something because you're lucky, and both organizations were happy to do it, but it should be something that's completely normal.
So you have to start working for police.
I would love it. I would love it. I don't have the time, but I would love that. I would love to have like 3 junior researchers or a couple of PhDs that do 50-50. It would be great, and I think it's beneficial for you, for us.
We have been saying this now for a few years. How we both want to bring it forward?
Money.
It's time. Is it time?
Capacity.
Or is it money? Yeah.
I'm doing this, so I'm the lucky one here. Maybe I have a long-term research program with the field, so the fiscal police. And I think the game changer there was that we did not request for funding for only research positions, but we also requested funding for, like what we were saying, someone on their side to be only responsible for the organization of how to coordinate this research program. So we have someone who has ample time and opportunity to coordinate this. So I'm coordinating this from the TU Delft side, and she's coordinating that from the field side. And all the people who are in this program, these are PhDs that indeed sometimes were part-time there, part-time with me, or fully funded PhDs. And they're all embedded there. So I sit there 1 day a week, or PhDs sit there either half-time or 1 day a week, which also solves this issue of clearance, getting the data, conform legal standards, arranged for scientific research. But that took like 2-3 years in the making. Right, and you have to be lucky because you need to find an advocate for this inside the organization that's willing to push this further. You need to have someone on the management level who signs off on this. You need to create funding opportunities. So this is all not trivial, but it works now in the way that I think you're describing these challenges. But to get back to your original question, right? So what's the biggest hurdle?
or I'm parsing your question, but what did you ask? Challenge. I think I always joke about this, but it's building up a tolerance to bad coffee. And what I mean by that is you have to actually be at the police. And they serve bad coffee, so that's why the analogy. But you have to be able to understand what it is that you are working on, what your problems are, because then you can. And I think we're all here on this table know this. But actually doing that, being embedded there, making sure that you understand what the problems are, making sure that you understand the terminology, that you know all the abbreviations, that helps a lot. And then, of course, comes the next step, which is trying to arrange funding and opportunities, etc. But the first step is understanding one another to the degree that you know what you're talking about.
Do you think it also works the other way around? Because I agree with you, and I think that we as scientists should make the effort to be there.
Yeah.
And if you're there, then you get a lot of interesting information as well.
Yep.
So it's really beneficial. But do you also think it could work the other way around? That the police or the field is saying, okay, we got some people that are analysts here.
Yep.
Why not be embedded at a university for a couple of days a week? So you learn what they're doing over there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when we started this whole idea, what I just mentioned, the idea was to do 1 or 2 PhDs in the program. And then there were indeed analysts in that team that I was working with who were saying, yeah, but wait a minute. I'm interested in learning more about scientific methods and scientific techniques that I can use in my day-to-day job. So they requested to be added to the program with a half-time PhD. So we're actually doing the both sides of the equation. I mean, we just started, right? This is like September last year, so we need to figure out if this actually is a structural thing and it works, and etc. But I fully see that. And when the manager of his team asked me whether or not he should make space in his formation to do this, right? Because because from a manager's perspective, you're losing someone for 50% of the time. The only thing I could say why he should do this was, if you want to keep this employee for more than a year or 2 years from now, but if you want to keep this employee for 4 or 5 years on the payroll, you should do this, because otherwise this person is going to seek something else, because apparently this person needs more challenge than you can give within the organization. And then it was, that's all you need to say, and then it's a done deal. But, no, so I fully agree. Yeah.
There's actually another way that this can work, not necessarily through research first, but also education.
Oh, absolutely.
So we do a lot of professional education, like an executive master cybersecurity, where we have people coming in from police, several levels of police, from municipalities, from companies, where you actually have, of course, very interesting in-class discussions, but at the end, they also have to write a thesis. And so that thesis can then be interesting for their employer, whatever team of police that they're connected to, or prosecution, or our company or municipality or so. And then the research flows back to them, methods as well as content. So it can also go in the other direction.
I think that all of you are kind of hinting at there has to be communication between sides. But in order for that communication to be strong and to be fluent, there also has to be, and lead somewhere, there also has to be some level of trust between between all parties involved. So my question to you now is, how do you build this trust in order to start facilitating these collaborations?
By drinking bad coffee.
It's actually building up a tolerance for bad coffee.
Yeah, or good coffee at the prosecution, but.
I come there less often, but yeah, I should maybe come there more often.
Yeah, but I think it's by that. It's as simple as that. By being together and talking stuff through and learning to know each other. It sounds very cliche, but that's what I learned through the years at least.
I think the main goal is to move away from this us versus them attitude, because that is something that's keeping the status quo. And when we move away from that, indeed by talking to each other more, by knowing and being on a first name basis, either through having people at different stations, or something that I've been doing with the European Parliament, for example, frequently be invited to stakeholder meetings and give your ideas, and then you have also representatives of NGOs at these stakeholder meetings, so you can bounce ideas off each other. that all works at creating trust and move away from that us versus them. So you don't have two camps, you actually have a common goal.
And
Sir, I agree with all of you, but it's an exception. We do have people doing PhDs while working for police. I know one person that actually did this, for example. I agree with investing time seeing each other, and I think it's a matter of give and take. I do presentation for you, you come do presentation for me, etc. And then often we meet, etc. and we do talks in between. Problem with the police organization, my experience is the investment versus the quick wins and that you can sell to management. I have a very practical organization. We want to show results. We want to catch the bad guys. People literally say it. I want to simply catch criminals. I don't want to worry about the rest. That's not speaking for very generic terms of police, and that's difficult. We try to build relationship with academia, but we are as a team an exception. As Team High-Tech Crime even, I think, it does happen in the regional units more and more on cybercrime, but outside of cybercrime, it's even more an exception. So it's a long way, and I think you guys are a real exception to us. We were very close. We can call each other easily and have a laugh, and then in the meantime we do some discussions on next IDs. That definitely works. I think we have four projects aligned, some further in the future. But you guys are the only ones that we actually do it. We're trying to build a network with academia all around, but it's not easy from both sides.
So do you see? Do you think that you guys are the exception in your organization? When I look at NSCR, for example, and I'm sure nobody's watching from NSCR, but I definitely think that we are an exception if you compare us to the rest of the academics there, because they're surprised to learn that I know so many people from the police or so many people from the district attorney or whatever, because they simply crunch numbers, do very difficult statistical stuff and very interesting theoretically driven research, sometimes with police data, but more often than not behind the screen. And they're actually not as involved as I am or Asier, for example, or other people here, and actually working with police or others. So I don't know if you guys have a similar, without of course saying something very bad about your university. I completely understand that.
I was actually going to say something good, or if you say some nice words, because we have a program with the intelligence agency. We have programs with, I am not proud of that, but we have programs with Shell. Whatever. So for us, it's really normal to have research programs with societal stakeholders for companies. And that can be in our field, so the police or the field or the intelligence agencies, or on the other end of the campus where you're talking about, Shell or other energy companies. So impact for us working with societal stakeholders is completely normal, but from where I actually did my bachelor and master training, totally opposite. So I recognize the NSCR sentiment, but for us it's new to work with, or for my faculty or my group, it's new to work with societal stakeholders, but not for industry stakeholders. Completely normal. Yeah.
Do you think it is a matter of incentives? Maybe some people from academia don't do that because what's in there for them? Because if they are evaluated for publishing papers, they can do that without stakeholders.
Yeah, it's very short term. Very short term.
I agree. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
What are the goals for police? Our goal is not doing research. Most of the people want to catch criminals. That's what they literally say. And then academia, I went to one of the conferences, what was it, the American Society of Criminology, and I was walking around there as police and looking at all those different researchers, and a lot of them were simply doing it for the purpose of research. And I was asking them, how can you implement this? And it didn't matter. Doing research is the whole goal. Whereas for police, that's using research is not a goal.
Mm.
So yeah, no,
it doesn't count. It doesn't to one degree. We don't win with it.
I agree with that, but I think it goes both ways. If from academia you come up with some insight actually the criminal landscape, which actually shows us that we're completely focusing on the wrong criminals, let's say it like that. Well, that for me would be very valuable. On the other hand, if you're doing research which actually has completely no value at all in the end, because it's not in conformity with what we see, it also doesn't make a lot of sense. So for me, it's a symbiosis actually between the two of us. So it also goes the other way around, because it could be that we're completely wrong in what we're doing, and that we're actually not catching these criminals, what your colleagues are saying, but because we would have way more effect if we, for example, would look into something else that we don't know, because we actually are not in touch with each other.
Do you feel that's also partly because we don't share the information, that researchers are dependent on either open source data, or, for example, I saw a lot of researchers going into how communities on forums behave, whereas I realized we don't look at forums anymore. But we don't tell them because it's covered information, etc. And now we're focusing on the ransomware, for example. Do you think that's there's a gap there as well?
I think that's always, it seems to be always an elephant in the room, you know, like the sharing of information. I personally think there are several ways to do that actually in place, but we don't talk enough about it and sit at the table and say, hey, how can we bring this further? Yeah, an example that we had last year, and I told Els just before, it was a cyber hackathon where we said, why can't we actually do what we do in normal cold cases, in cybercrime cold cases, and then actually ask, you know, the help of others? In the end, that will mean that in concrete cases, with all the details, etc., that you are within a legal framework working together. I mean, so that is possible, I would say. It's also still something that we will want to bring before a court. So, but I mean, that already says like there is, I think, way more possible if we sit together and talk these things through.
But getting back to your incentives question, right? So so what's in it for us as academics? I would even argue, that's why my immediate response was, you know, very short-sighted if you think like this. I think my papers are of a higher quality if I do use police data than if I don't use police data. And then the other thing, so there's that, and there's the other aspect, which is I'm doing something which I'm pretty sure no one else is able to do because I'm the only one having access. So there's no one, because, you know, academics, we are trying to make sure, because you talk about you know, covered information, sure, but we have the same thing, right? Because if I'm telling Rutger what I'm working on, if he beats me doing that, exactly that, but then faster than I'm doing that, I cannot, if I submit that paper after, I cannot say, you know, I'm the first to do this because you already did that. So novelty is a big thing here. I am quite sure that this is novel because no one else is doing this because I'm the only one having this information. So to me, the incentives are pretty clear. And if that's not enough for you, I think in the end, why science is also because we want to advance society, and that's the clear goal right there. So for me, it's quite, you know, quite evident, but for others maybe not.
What about the funding models though? So how can we bring this forward in these financing models? Because for the academics sitting around the table, we're all under a big pressure to go for the big grants. And the calls that come out there are not always fitting with these kind of topics that are interesting for you. So you have a clash between what the funding models, what the financiers want, what the grant financiers want, and what does you as society, as a part of society, want. So isn't that something that we need to work on, talking about incentives? The incentives of academia are not aligned with the incentives of law enforcement. Is that the problem?
I'm wondering, could we get stakeholders sitting in the table where these calls are being made And
Well,
also,
they are.
They are.
They are.
and then, so where does this disconnect come from then?
Maybe time. It takes too long to gain a grant, and the problem, as you say, you want something very fast. You need information, you need findings very fast, and that maybe is not what science and finance models are about, especially now the new buzzword is slow science, I've heard, so that's not gonna improve.
And there's the problem with cybercrime in general, that people not in the field tend not to feel it,
Mhm.
the impact, and underestimate the risk, etc. Especially, I think that's also police, senior management, a serious crime, organized crime, the traditional types of crimes. That's what you see and feel. If there's a ransomware attack, only then people start to run on these.
Right.
These cases. That's also maybe a problem in cybercrime as a topic in itself.
I think in addition, I think it has improved over the past years, at least in the Netherlands, because we now have the NWA schemes, which means that you have to have societal impact. Well, I'm also currently writing an ERC grant, which if you talk to advisors, they explicitly say it should not mention any practical relevance in here. It's only fundamental science. So here is your problem.
Yep.
If it should only be very fundamental science, otherwise it's not good enough. That's a very wrong starting point, right? So when you look at all of the personal grants, in the Netherlands, the Vici, European ERC starting grant, Consolidator, they're all very much focused on career researchers, and it's all focused on excellent science. No impact at all.
But why?
I don't know. Let's ask them. It's a very good question. But in the Netherlands, you do see now with the National Science Agenda that a lot of the companies, governments, they actually were involved, and also civilians were involved in making this agenda. What are the most urgent questions in the Netherlands, in societal questions, and how can we make sure that we as scientists do relevant research with partners for these societal problems. So I think it's improving, but it's very slow. And still, I would also argue that if I had to pick between getting an NWA application, so more societal relevant, or an ERC grant, I would go for the second one because it's better for your career. Of course, everybody knows me. I will do both, and I hope to get involved. But for a lot of the career academics, it's going to be the individual grants which are not focused at all on societal relevance.
It's a contradiction with what you're saying, that you actually think your research is more valuable if you use practical data from police.
No, I agree with him.
No, but so
But that's not what the
contradicting.
funders
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to, so this
You need
is
to
this
hire.
is the catch-22, right? So you need to have the funding to write the papers, and the papers get better whenever you're using police data, but you need to have funding, and you need to promise something which is not the thing that you see my point?
Yeah.
Right? But there's a third option, which is
Horses dirt, all right.
there's a third option, and the third option is that you're not going for NWA or NWA grants or whatever, and we as academics don't apply for the funding. Law enforcement applies for the funding.
Yeah, but if law enforcement applies for funding, it's out of our heads,
No,
because we have to go through the aanbestedingen,
no. So there's no problem that the government can fix by throwing extra money to it, right? That's the idea. So for cybercrime, there's a lot of money flowing through police, and you guys don't know how to spend it all.
Well,
No.
sure.
I mean,
Your words.
It's getting interesting now.
I mean, same with defense spending, right? So in Parliament, we say, okay, Ukraine war, bad, more money is needed, and then the Defense Department is like, yeah, I have no clue where to spend this extra 10 million, right? So this is happening with the police too. So the ondermijningsgelden are not near bottom, right? So that's totally not completely finished, yeah? So what the field did, we had a conversation about this, right? Because I know that if I'm going to apply for a grant for this program that I have right now, I wouldn't get it because there's no clear scientific impact. I have a lot of societal impact, but scientific impact, I don't know, right? Because I can't see the data that I need because I didn't get that before the research program because I need to apply, you see, yeah. So I don't know that. So The only thing I can do is write about societal impact. This is the impact we're looking for. So instead of me asking for funding, they wrote a proposal when the new cabinet was formed, and there's like money throwing around all departments. So they asked for money for their specific unit that they can spend on academic research, and they got that. And that's why I now have this program. So they applied for this funding. I did not.
But isn't here the problem then that it becomes a political issue instead of
Yeah, but science funding is a political issue.
But
that's
drilling
true, but
around
at
money
least it's transparent.
Yes, so you could
I mean, it's
argue.
good for you because you
No,
got it, but
No, I agree. So, but this is the problem with contract research or with third-party funding schemes, right? That this is the problem with that. It's intransparent. I fully agree. This is why we did press release and everything to make it absolutely clear that this is the way in which this money has been spent. But I agree with you. It's of course I would rather have this in an NWO or NWA scheme, because then the best academic wins. And now,
But if I go, I mean, I try to do this, right? If I go to management to ask for money, ministry or whatever, to ask for money to get somebody from Rutger's team, put in my team to do research into pathways, they redirect me to police and science, which is the institute within the police, completely very general, very far away from us. And we go there, and then there is a complete application, everybody can reply. So that wouldn't work then. For my team, it wouldn't work.
I know of
I would have
examples.
to give it away.
I know of examples also with Team Crime where big chunks of funds have gone through academic partners, not through Politie en Wetenschap, but through other. But we can talk about this after. But I mean, I'm not saying
transparent.
I'm not saying that this is. I'm not saying that this is the royal route everyone should take, right? Because that is in competition with one another. That would be the best, because now if Rutger had a better plan than I had, he should have gotten the money and not me, right? But now he didn't know. He knew. But I mean, the point is, the transparency issue is there. I totally get that. But then we get back to the trust conversation, right? So not every group you want applying for such a grant, because you have not built trust with each and every group there is out there. So that's there too, right? So, but there are two sides of a coin, right? So on the one hand, transparency would be good, but on the other hand, how it now works is the way it has worked, but it's not the ideal situation, but is based on this whole ecosystem of trust.
What about the WODC kind of way in which they create a program based upon questions of their own organization, and what they kind of do is they select a number of trusted parties. So here's the trust part to actually in competition, 3 or 4 different organizations that actually write a proposal, and they are being screened and stuff like that. I mean, it's also not completely clear or transparent, because why are they selecting only those 3? But it then doesn't completely depend on context that you have. Because I agree with you with that also the police, maybe not your manager, but the manager of your manager, they have context, of course, within high up, and they can make sure when there is a new government that they make sure that this should be a priority and we should get more funding, etc., etc. So, and then we're talking not about tens of thousands of euros, but millions of euros. So I totally agree with you that can be used to better work with scientists. But at the moment, it's kind of dependent on the person that's sitting there and the people that he or she knows. So
It's only once every, well, usually
that's
4 years, right?
I mean, with every budget adjustment, this same scheme works, right? So with 4 years nota, 9 years nota, this works the exact same, right? Of course, the bigger diversion of funds is once every month. We don't know how long this cabinet will last, but I mean, let's say once every 4 years. True. But not to get bogged down in this sort of like intransparency and how to make it better. My point was, if you're looking at this only from academics need funding to do stuff, I think that that's a very one-dimensional picture. Right? I think that there is another dimension here, because that also would signal the importance that a law enforcement or a prosecution service sees in collaboration. If you would both,
Yeah, I agree.
would
And
go
that,
for
and
funding.
that is especially, you can convince, well, we tend to convince management if we talk about evaluation
Yeah.
of the stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
For traditional crimes, we don't always ask ourselves, how effective was this arrest?
No.
But for, especially for my field of work with offender prevention, which is fairly new for cybercrime, this question is raised every time, of course. Yeah. How effective are you? Why should we invest in it? So that's a possibility. Yeah.
But isn't this also, isn't it, are we not touching upon a very big topic of the police and maybe also the district attorney simply just doing things because they think it works. We're just catching the bad guys, right? We want evidence finding, but shouldn't it be evidence based? Shouldn't we be able to say, hey, you're spending a lot of government money. When you do it, try to do it the best way possible. Meaning you have to show that this intervention that you're using works, or
It should.
and yeah,
Science
yeah, you think so, but
It should, but it's not
no, it's
the
not.
case now.
What's your opinion about it?
No, I think that would only enhance what we're doing. It's also, well, it's maybe a little bit too simple to say that we just go after some criminals. We of course also have intelligence telling us, where to focus on. But still, if we come up with interventions, then I mean to see it, that's what Wouter also says. If it actually has the effect that we want it to have, it would be really good to check it and to have academia involved.
And I remember, I'm going to give a nice anecdote about your team. When we started doing the Google stuff that Asier presented about earlier, I remember distinctly that you guys said, yeah, but Rutger, we really want to get things moving, and we're so scared that you guys are going to slow us down because we got the budget this year, we want to start. I remember we talked about this in September or something like that, or maybe even in August. And months went by, we had a research plan ready, we informed you about how to set this up, and I remember that we were not slowing you down, but you were slowing us down. And not to blame this on you, but to show that sometimes police organizations or district attorney also, they might be scared that scientists slow everything down because they first want to do a full year study into the literature. And of course, we do want to do that, but we also are very much, we know the literature, right? We're not new. So we can also, those things can be done fast, I want to say. So it might also be a case of just doing it. And by doing it, showing that it makes your life easier, because in the end, you don't just have an intervention you did, but you can also say, hey, and these scientists, they also showed that this or this or this worked. That didn't work, but they need to figure out why it didn't work. So it can also help you in the future, of course. And I think we found a way of doing that together. And if we can make sure that others within the police, but also field and other government agency knows that it can actually benefit their work, then it can be really successful. Because I think we get nicer data, better data. You guys get an evidence base, which you can use for the coming decades too.
It does, definitely. In this specific example, now we can use this to convince other law enforcement around the world to copy these interventions, because we can use your research, which is the argument. Do this in this way. Yeah, definitely. But then again, I think working with you is an exception. I mean, that's also because of Berg, but no, but like how we work together, I don't work personally with other researchers. We try to set it up with a network now, but it's only very, very recently, in a few weeks now. So how can we then do that with others as well? Right? We don't do that now.
No, yeah, and of course, my interest is not that everybody else is going to do that.
Mine is.
No, but I think there are plenty of interesting fundamental questions that needs to be answered. So, to be fair, I think if you do it right, then you need to set up a research program of what's interesting for you, And then you can connect the scientists that are working on it. And I think the field is big enough. And you're focusing on cybercrime, but we're doing completely different things. So I think that can be very beneficial if you can get this group of people together and just do it.
Yeah. We are talking a lot about police and academia work together. How does this go for prosecution office? You also sit on a gold mine of data in your systems, of course. Do you see the same?
Very quickly, please.
Oh, very quickly.
No, I think we all do it together. So I mean, we have the same goal. I also with police, I always say it's a cooperation. Of course, it's under the authority of the prosecution, but you have the same goal, so you cooperate. And that also counts for the added value that cooperating with academia has. I think that there's no difference for me between police and prosecution in that.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah.
Could maybe help if we would do it together.
What a great way of concluding this roundtable. Thanks all presenters. We talked about stuff like truth finding, trust, incentives, budget, and financials. It was a very nice discussion. I only got to ask the first question of all the ones that, and then all the follow-ups. So I think we could be talking for hours, right, about this. The good thing is that this will be also recorded for everybody to see later on. I hope everybody can enjoy this discussion later. And again, I would like to thank you all, and we will leave it up to you, Melissa, closing our session here. Thanks for all the arrangements.